Yeah, so let's see what happens.
Dig it.
All right. What's up, guys? It is WTF Saturday, not WTF Friday on the Nerd Herder Council. You've got myself, AJ, and we've got our special guest host over here to my actual right on my screen, but left for the purposes of the camera. Joseph Friend, how you doing tonight?
What is going on, AJ? You know, you want to pull me into the most random get together of the weekend. You know, I don't know what time it is for you, but I could figure it out just by looking at a map. This topic came up tonight during AJ and I playing a wonderful new game. Have you heard of this game, Rogue Heroes? If you haven't, I need you to pick it up and play it. It's semi-randomly, systematically generated Zelda. That's all I'm going to say. It's also got some Dark Cloud elements in it. But then we start talking about Firefly. See, AJ and I, we have this problem. We get together and we start talking about random things. I really feel like we're setting a precedence for Joe and AJ's random podcast. I think that's something we should get set up because it just goes out the window every time we get together. And tonight we landed on Firefly.
Yeah.
And like
exactly.
a pro, AJ says, hang on a second, let me go live. Good job,
well,
AJ.
Kind of. This is a confluence of two things. We got there's only so long that we can bullshit on Google Hangouts before we realize that we should probably just go live with it anyway. And
Exactly.
also, I don't know how Patreon works. So this is really a test just to see how we get like a live stream going on Patreon, because we just did recently set that up on Nerd Herder Council. And
congratulations,
I don't know actually how to do those things. So
it's real simple. You've executed well tonight. Hopefully next time it'll be less figuring it out and more let's just do it.
Exactly. That's the hope, at least. Now, one rule of any WTF episode, of course, is that there is drinking involved, right?
Absolutely.
There's not only Pepsi in here.
This is your generic blue solo cup. I think this started as ice with whiskey and has since become whiskey, Dr. Pepper. There might even be some vodka in here because whatever bottle isn't empty is the one you pour in the cup.
Oh, man, you're going... Dude, I know I went for the MC logo on the StreamYard tonight, but you didn't have to go Infinity Gauntlet to Infinity Bottle, okay? You can stay more focused than that. You've got an impressive whiskey collection. This I know.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. You know, I'm not a pro, or I'm not a super fan of whiskey where the wall is nothing but whiskey bottles. But eventually, I'm going to show everybody what's happening here to my left. For those that do not know, I'm in a new house. I'm building a new studio. The place that I've been for 15 years, I'm no longer there. I'm here now. And guess what? I get to make things again. I get to redesign spaces and really make things work. So I'm really excited for what's going on over here. Give me about a month, and I'm going to have this ready to roll. And I don't know about you, AJ, but it's been a while since we've talked Trek. It has not been a while since you guys talked Star Wars. So congratulations, by the way, on your recent acquisition of the Virtual Cantina Network. I'm really, really proud of you guys for just getting in there and taking over. I mean, I know John has all the answers. I can't say it with a straight face. I'm sorry.
Well, it's kind of back to our roots, right? Like the fact that we used to have a disclaimer ahead of our show saying that, there's going to be some stuff going on that pisses people off. And then we got rid of that because we thought it was like an old joke. And then we got on the podcast network, and now we say it every time again because, the rest of the Virtual Cantina Network is
hyper-focused on Star Wars, right?
Yes. They are a very fan-focused, very polite kind of a network, and we don't always toe the company line, so to speak. So,
well, that's great though, because that's kind of your ballpark a few years ago. The thing that changed about the Nerd Herder Council was it wasn't always Star Wars. It became nerd-centric. And I was a little worried there that you guys were going to fall away and go back to just doing Star Wars again, but You nailed it. You guys are staying in stride. And like I said, seeing that Patreon pop up finally, good job, AJ.
Well, that's what we're testing out here,
Talked him
right?
into it.
I've got ideas, and we've got a poll running on our Patreon actually to see if anyone's got any additional ideas on what they would like to see that is actually worth paying money for from us. So, bottom line though, it all actually was a part of becoming the member of the podcast network because there's too many locations to stream from that we had to like pay a crap ton of extra money through StreamYard to get to all those locations. And I finally just went like, you know what, this is costing us a lot of money. Maybe someone wants to maybe chip in $1 or $2 or $3 and help us pay for this, so it's not a money losing effort. We're not looking to get rich off of this. We're just looking to not lose our ass on it. So
just want to drive the car with gas in it. I don't necessarily need it to go fast, and I don't need it to be this never ending journey. I just want to get from point A to point B.
Exactly.
You guys are nailing it, by the way.
Exactly. Super simple. Super simple.
Keep it going. Just keep going.
But we're busy talking business instead of talking about anything that people actually want to watch.
Right.
By the way.
Well, this was the introductory period of the impromptu live stream. Oh, Mars, and we're in trouble.
Well,
this was unplanned, AJ. We didn't tell everyone it was happening. It just kind of popped in here. So hopefully we recover. Hopefully we get off to a nice journey. And if I have to bust out what the dub here in a few minutes, I'm willing to do that.
That is an excellent thing that we're going to hang on to for an actual planned episode.
All right.
Yeah, what the dub is actually hilarious. We did a test run earlier tonight.
You're welcome.
I think we got that. Yeah. Honestly, Joe, when you texted that over to me, I was like, that sounds like a good 5 minutes of laughs before it's like it struck me as the Cards Against Humanity problem, where it's a very one note kind of joke, but it's better than that.
But you failed.
The trick is I don't know how we stream it without getting copyright strikes and getting unstreamed as soon as we go live with it. So we got to figure that part out.
Gonna have to work on that. I feel like we've already laid the groundwork with some of our recent watch-alongs. I think we have a strategy to keep that from happening. Though it may not be the most visually pleasing, it will absolutely get the point across. And like all games that are based on Cards Against Humanity, or to be more specific, apples to apples, because let's be honest, that's all most of these play along and laugh games are.
Right.
Like all of those, it's kind of a one-trick pony, but it gets better the more you drink.
Yes. So that is something we'll probably reserve either for.
Stay tuned.
I don't want to. I want to say reserve for a
on
Patreon
NHC
here, but it's definitely going to be. It's definitely going to be a WTF Friday or Saturday kind of a thing, and not a regular Wednesday kind of thing.
Absolutely.
But we were talking. The whole reason I thought, hey, let's go live because we have something to talk about, is we were bullshitting about Firefly of all things, and that's definitely one of those topics that John is never going to talk about. John has never seen that
sad. You can't tell me this is not a show he would like if he would spend some time with it.
He would like it. The problem is convincing him to put in the time to watch it.
Let me call him here real quick. I know it's late, and I'm going to wake him up and just shame him for not watching a show. Don't get me wrong. I'm guilty of not jumping on the bandwagon. I don't have a reason, but Firefly was this hidden gem there for a while that a few people talked about, but not everybody. And I watched a couple episodes and I didn't get it. And then I got it. And when you get it, it's a special combination of ideas that does not get very much attention in science fiction. People call it a Western in space, or they call it space cowboys. It's not that, but it's a different view of that future that we all keep talking about with all of our favorite science fiction, right? It's a variation of what happens when we go to space. Because one thing about Firefly that does not make sense, we have spaceships. Mm-hmm. We go to these faraway, distant planets and galaxies, and things happen, and people still have guns with bullets in them. We don't have laser weapons. We don't
True.
have jet weapons. If you can send a spaceship into space, you can create a gun that's basically a jet engine with a trigger that just launches everything across the screen. It's an interesting combination of ideas, and it's fun. AJ, you like Firefly, right?
Oh, I love it.
Thank you for that very, very detailed answer to the very simple question, AJ. Moving on.
You asked me a binary question.
I did.
You love it, right? And the answer was yes or no.
Well, I'm glad you like it, because when I actually sat down and watched it for the first time, end to end, start to finish, yeah, it still took till episode 3. But then I got it. And for fans of this show, I'm there with you. I want more of it, and I'm afraid to let more of it happen. Because for better or for worse, they tried to wrap up some of these hanging plot threads with the Serenity film. And it's never going to be Star Trek. You're never going to have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different shows that happen along this timeline of Firefly. Firefly very much is Cowboy Bebop. It's supposed to be a snapshot in time about a group of people and the antics that ensue. That's what it's supposed to be about, and if you try to dwell on it or just keep it going, you're not going to run out of ideas, but I do think you're going to start using some less than entertaining ideas. And though I am on board for anything they want to do with it, it's a solid. What we have is solid enough that I'm afraid to go for more. I really am. There's 26 sessions of Cowboy Bebop. There's a film. If they popped up tomorrow and said, we've got more to say with these characters, I would be a little skeptical. I would still give it a shot, though, because that's how much I love this show.
But the reason that Firefly still lives on in the memories of fans is because it was very clearly like doing the season 1 thing of all good sci-fi shows, where it's just laying the groundwork. There is
Agreed.
An entire saga to be told, and they were just setting up the world for everybody, just to put the characters and the pieces on the chessboard, so they could go on for season 2 and 3 and 4 and get into it more.
And there's more than one thread.
And it was
of
course the classic Fox thing from the early 2000s, where they're just like, yeah, we'll give you a little bit of a runway, and by the way, canceled. Like, how many canceled Fox shows were there? Family Guy even made a joke about it. So, I mean, the show just stopped. It wasn't even like, it didn't end its first season. Like, that wasn't even the season finale. They just ran out of money because the network pulled the plug, and that was it. And then they tried to do the Serenity movie to try to give it some sort of a conclusion. And so
what they did was perfectly fine. I enjoyed it.
It was decent. It was decent. But I think what that show felt like to me was almost like a Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones was a thing. Like that, the whole series was very clearly like had a very fleshed out world creatively, and we had just scratched the surface. The same way that Game of Thrones, like you see the White Walkers in the cold open of the first episode, and it takes until the end of season 2 before they come back. And I feel like that's what come on, I haven't watched Firefly in a while. Not the Ravagers, those are Guardians of the Galaxy. Who are the cannibals? The space cannibals. The Reavers. The Reavers were not supposed to come back and all of a sudden mess with our heroes in this feature-length movie that was supposed to wrap everything up. Like, that was the big bad that they were building to for seasons of storytelling.
Right.
And they just had to like fast track it all.
Our heroes discovering the origin of what was the ultimate bad in the universe, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The first standout bad guy in the series is that line from River, Hands of Blue, 2x2. And though they eventually show up, they never go back to them. And if that isn't a hindsight letdown, because it's like Walking Dead, right? In the later seasons, we've borrowed from the comics, but we're telling the story differently. So
Hmm.
you build towards these ultimate bad guys. You build towards the governor. And anybody that had been reading the comics knew that Negan was coming. And then you do Negan, and everybody says, "Oh, now that Negan's gone, who's going to be the bad guy?" And all the comic book people were like, "Oh, the Whisperers are coming." And then they did. And then you get the Horde. It was this build upon build upon build upon build. So the characters and the setting and the bad guys really do feel fleshed out. I don't know that you can. You can. It has a Western feel
Hmm.
until it becomes a sci-fi fantasy, right? When the day-to-day interactions are very Western, when they're making their deals and they're trying to get paid, and that's all they're focused on, very Western. Then when they start breaking into hospitals and these, I don't know what to call them. You can't call them government agents. You can't call them evil characters. But when they show up and they exhibit this absolute definitive power, almost like the Men in Black, where whatever happens, nobody's going to know about it. And if you do, you're not going to survive. It's like, what's the bad guy in Old Country for Old Men? Did you see me? Because if you did, you can't.
Yeah.
It's one of those. You keep building up, building up, building up, and then you get this
Are you talking
big
about the
payoff.
Alliance, by the way?
I am talking about the Alliance.
Okay.
And that's kind of your military state, right, in the show.
Right.
So you have these different pieces of the puzzle, very much like a good sci-fi, a good Western, or even like what Star Wars has done, where, yeah, we have the Empire, and then we have the First Order, and then we can sprinkle these little pieces from the books and the comics that elaborate on there's not just one bad in the universe, right? It in hindsight feels rushed, but I don't blame the show. I blame the people that paid for the show,
Yeah.
because they
Mhm.
clearly didn't love it as much as the fans love it today.
There was this weird golden age of sci-fi, and I wish I had my timeline organized for this, but we didn't prep anything.
Heck no.
Uh, but I love this era of the shows of, like, you had the Stargate series running, you had Farscape on Sci-Fi, and then here comes Firefly. Like, all these, like, non-major franchises they were trying to launch into major
They were trying
franchises.
to do something new.
Yeah, it was something new, exactly. And it's in this golden era of time when, okay, the budget definitely shows itself on Firefly. Like, especially I remember I think it might be the second to last episode or something where they're defending the whorehouse from the sheriff or whatever, because he's, you know, he got one of the prostitutes pregnant, and they're trying to it's very clearly just like Mylar. It's just ordinary commercial grade
Straight out of
materials
Deadwood.
stapled onto a building in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, like it didn't look like a set piece at all. And I'm like, I don't care. The
But
storytelling is so good, I don't care.
you don't care because this is shortly after the time of your Hercules and your Xena and
Right.
your,
Yes, exactly.
what was the name of the show that Bruce Campbell did where he was traveling through time? It had a very patriotic intro. I'm going to look it up in a second when I'm not
I've never
talking,
even
but
heard of that.
a lot of
But
people
yeah, that was
haven't,
the
and
era of
it's
syndication.
exactly. So you got the feel of the fantasy, but you didn't necessarily have the budget of the last 10 years, right? This is before Marvel and Disney and everybody were spending money on sci-fi. This was still when we were just trying to make a show that wasn't the same sitcom as everybody else. Um, I think the show's effects, though they may be a little dated today, they're fine. I will stand on the hill and say that Firefly is the only show I've ever watched that actually gets space combat correct. When they cut to the CGI and show like explosions and ships firing at each other, there's no sound.
I
Because
do
there's
love
no
that.
air up there. There wouldn't be any sound. As soon as
I
you
do
cut
love that.
inside the ship, it's shaking and it's making rumbles and it's doing the Star Trek thing. It totally makes sense. Scientifically speaking, totally makes sense. You can call it a budget constraint if you want. I don't care.
No, it wasn't a budget constraint. That was a choice. That was a creative choice to say there's no air in space. There's no sound that travels there. That's what it is.
100%.
Because there's enough like also hamstrung shows that still put sound in space. So that was a creative choice. Yes.
As much as I love Star Trek and it's a piece of Star Trek design that I expect, it's something that's believable about this show if you look past the CGI. Yes, it's early 2000s and it's just modeled to look like what it is roughly. But given a few episodes, you start to believe it, you start to buy into it, and eventually it clicks. And yeah, it's just great. I don't care how dated it is or how simple it is compared to other things.
Now, the other thing that we were talking about was that, you know, Firefly persists with like a certain fan base. It's very much a cult classic at this point.
Absolutely.
Now, given all the time that's passed and the fact that they killed two of the main characters in the Firefly movie, Serenity, would you restart the series or would you reboot the series? I mean, you've got people like Monica Baccarin and Alan Tudyk and Nathan Fillion who have gone on to impressive careers since then. It would be a very expensive show to make with those people these days. And not all those characters survived the movie. So do you hit the reset button and recast? Or do you try to continue the storyline from Serenity?
I want to like the Netflix-backed live-action Cowboy Bebop. I'm not there yet. First season, watched it, wasn't satisfied with what I received, but I'm glad they tried. I really am. And maybe it'll find its footing with the next season. Though I feel a little cheated that the big cliffhanger for season 2 is Radical Edward shows up at the end of season 1. Spoilers for a show that's been on Netflix now for quite a while. Firefly, you either have to decide that the show was before its time and we want to give it the budget and the time and the staff to make the show that was originally in the showrunner's head. If you want to do that, you can reboot the show. And you could shot for shot remake that show today. And yes, it would look better. You know, it'd be like remastering Firefly. It would be fine. Anytime you change characters, don't have the answer. I can't, or actors portraying characters. I don't have the answer because if you changed the actors today, would the longtime fans be satisfied? I don't think the studio would care because the studio would look at it and say, well, we're not interested in the audience you have. We're interested in the audience that we're going to get. So you have a conflict of ideas or goals, I think, between those two things. So I wouldn't recast it, but I wouldn't remake it. I would just pick it up where they left off. And I got to be honest, as much as I hate prequels, I think I hate midquels more. So if you've already made Serenity, just keep going. If there's more to tell with those characters, just keep going. Yes, that means 2 people are dead. 2 characters are dead. That doesn't mean you can't flash back and use those characters as a storytelling point, because one thing Firefly does very well is it uses flashbacks to drive plots throughout individual episodes. So I think you could do that and it would be good. They could also just hit the reset button and it would probably be good because it would be picking it up with today's eyes and today's mindset and today's technology. It's going to be better either way. The one thing they shouldn't do is just throw the cast out the window, because fans love those characters and they love those actors portraying those characters.
Yeah, the time period that this show was made in puts it in an awkward spot, right? Like, it's very easy to say with like Star Wars or Star Trek, certain actors are either aged out or not even with us anymore, so you have to recast. But there's just few enough years between the original show and now to say, like, if you wanted to do a Firefly resurrection of some kind, you could still get Nathan Fillion. We just saw him in Guardians 3. You could still get Monica Baccarin. You could still get all these characters back again with the original actors, and semi-plausibly not have to address the time jump.
It might be
Like
more believable because some of those characters were very well portrayed as older than they actually were. I think, at least, especially Nathan Fillion. I think he carried that character of Maul as an older, grizzled, angry war veteran. He played him more like somebody in his 40s, I think. Little more Indiana Jones, where he's been around the block and he's frustrated. Not just frustrated, but he's bored with the, can you say, the young man's conflicts? Like, most of the development with him and the shepherd is about spirituality and religion and how he generally views the world. Not necessarily about what he believes, but, to steal a line from the movie, I don't care what you believe, just believe. So that whole build with those two characters, he plays him like an older man. So maybe he would actually age into the character a little bit. There's a few of the others I think they're better played as younger, almost naive. But none of those people have aged out, I don't think.
I'll be honest, I don't remember the movie well enough to know which characters died. So if I was going to reference actors, I don't know if I'm referencing a dead character in doing so.
Well, don't worry about it, because...
So spoilers for Serenity. Joe, can you tell us who dies in the movie?
Well,
I don't know.
It's a movie that came out in 2005, right? So it is what it is. Alan Tudyk, his character Walsh, died.
Well, that's unforgivable, and we need him back.
Absolutely. And Ron Glass, who played the shepherd, he died.
Love the
one of them
but...
one of them feels unnecessary, and the other one feels unfair. Like, if you haven't watched it in a while, go back and watch Serenity, and it will hit all the modern tragedy points. Because you have an impossible situation that's overcame by the end of the film, and it's overcame by Spock going in there and
it's totally a Star Trek too. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, it yes, they get out of it, but somebody has to die, and it's a good plot. It's a good story. It's a good payoff. I've tried watching the movie with some people that have never seen Firefly, and though they enjoyed it, they liked it more when they understood what they were trying to tie up with that movie.
God, that movie had such a heavy lift because it had to pay off all the people that had watched the show and all the people that hadn't watched the show. You have to introduce the characters, but also not spoon feed everything to the audience. Basically, the built-in audience was most of the box office for that movie. So
yeah,
impossible situation for that movie entirely. But man, the shepherd is one of those characters where so intriguing, right? Like, they purposely kept all of his backstory vague in the show, and then you get to the movie and he dies. So there's only so much you can tell. And now, if you want to tell more of the shepherd, how do you work that organically into any continuation of the storyline? Like, why would you talk about the backstory of a character that's dead?
You could. Yeah, it's before its time, right? It's if Ahsoka Tano is supposed to be the Gandalf of Star Wars, then you have you have all these characters now that just, if you explain the backstory, it's like Yoda. If you explain the backstory, then it loses its mysticism. Clearly, the shepherd was somebody not to be fucked with.
Mm-hmm.
Because when he picks up arms and is like, yep, the Bible says that.
Yeah, he's like the most lethal person, because not only is he competent with weapons, but he's also got conviction on his side. Like, he is righteous in his actions.
And yeah, give me the money. Give me the money. Get me Ron Glass, and let's make like the Mandalorian of Firefly shows. Like, let's make The Shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
I'd watch that show. What's that about?
Yeah.
It's about everything that happened that led up to him going away. You can do that. Yes, it's a prequel, and I've already said I don't like those, but put some emphasis on that character. I think it'd be an interesting show. Yeah. And maybe that's what they do with the reboot. Maybe, you could write that episode. How many times have you heard this? We found his journal. And the episode is, we're reading his journal aloud to one another. Oh, wow, he really was an amazing man. But what's been happening for the past hour is, all the things that they're talking about. We're just watching it. Like, this is the story of why it became this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just 100% before its time. Love what they did with it. Am upset every time I watch it that there isn't more of it. And I'm afraid that they'll do wrong if they try to do more. I don't want them to reboot it, though. I don't want there to be... They did this with Ghost in the Shell, right? They made the movie, and they made the TV series, and they made the TV series movies, and then eventually somebody just said, we're going to reboot Ghost in the Shell, and it's going to be... We're starting over, but the animation style, the voice actors, the characters, everything's going to be different. Well, why are you doing that? What reason
it's
do you have?
It's not Ghost in the Shell anymore, yeah.
You're restarting for the sake of restarting, which tells me you don't have anything new to say.
See, this is an interesting intersection then in terms of like what makes a show then, because we brought this up on the whole premise that there was more story to tell than ever got the opportunity, which means you could totally do another version of this. But at the same time, what you're saying is all the other factors that go into making a successful property, like the visuals and the actors portraying the characters and the time in which it's released is also a thing. None of those are the same, so don't bother. Like, that was lightning in a bottle, and lightning don't strike twice in the same place. So
either keep going.
Like, you're saying you want more Firefly, but you're also saying it's impossible to make more Firefly.
I think it's impossible to reboot it with a new cast and have people care. That, I think, is impossible. I think they'd get away with it, but now you're fighting that same prequel battle where the first movie that we're expecting everybody to go watch that's going to decide how much money we spend on the next movie is a prequel. I love the Chris Nolan Batman films mostly. Mostly meaning the first two. I do love those. But we all knew Batman Begins was a prequel of how he became Batman. Why does everybody love The Dark Knight? I got news for you. It's not Heath Ledger. Though we love that performance, you love The Dark Knight because The Dark Knight is an entire movie of Batman being Batman. That's why you love it. There's no prequel. There's no going off into the sunset. It's just a story about Batman being Batman. That's why you love that movie. We love Firefly because though they tell us pieces of the character's backstory, generally speaking, they don't explain anybody. They just start. And I think that's the best sci-fi.
It's the Star Wars formula, right? Like, you pick up in episode 4 of Star Wars.
Yes,
and then
you mean Star Wars, right? Because it was just Star Wars when he first made it.
Yeah, yeah. Knowing that there was, stuff in the background. Like, he had his own headcanon going on and then, made 3 movies out of it. But it's exactly that. Like, as soon as Empire Strikes Back came out, then episode 4 was branded as episode 4. Otherwise, it was Star Wars. And then when Empire Strikes Back came out, it was episode 5, Empire Strikes Back. And you're like, holy crap, wait a minute. Does that mean the last one was 4? What happened to 1, 2, and 3? And a legend is born. And
Exactly.
I feel like Firefly is exactly the same way. Like, I don't feel like they were making it up on the, pardon the wordplay, fly. They had a story Bible. They had a whole universe mapped out,
Yes.
and all these people had predetermined backstories, and we were just getting the most interesting snippets for dramatic effect, which means you can revisit the rest of it at any time and make a story out of it, because it doesn't feel like they're making it up because they needed more stories to tell. It feels like those are stories that already existed and just hadn't been told yet. And that's what makes a good prequel.
It does, but you have to care about it. Like a prequel that is a sequel is a cop out to me every time.
Well, let's take the preacher. Let's take the preacher, for example. The preacher shows up, and the preacher definitely does things that are unpreacher-like. And even the characters recognize that's not really what a preacher does. What is your story, dude? And then we just never get it, which means there is a story there. If the characters recognize it in the story, then it's something the writers have already considered. This isn't J.J. Abrams we're talking about. So this is Joss Whedon, and this is good Joss Whedon, for lack of a better term.
Have you watched the Fantastic Beasts films? The 3 films they've made following up to the Harry Potter series, but it's a prequel.
Sorry, I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. Yeah.
I'm asking the question not to get your review of them, but do you think Dumbledore is a more interesting character now that you're getting more of his backstory?
No. Because they didn't tell a good backstory.
Or they haven't finished, right? Well, we're still building to the end in theory. You know, there's supposed to be more, but there either will be or there won't be because money. I always think
it's looking like won't be. The box office keeps dropping because
I liked them.
Keep making.
They were fine.
Movies.
They were fine. I liked them. I always think of the story of.
I mean, the real question is, would Harry Potter as a film series have been as successful if the books weren't so popular first?
It definitely would not have been, because there are legit gaps in the films that don't make sense.
Yep.
And if you ask a diehard fan, Goblet of Fire comes to mind. If you ask a diehard fan who has read the books 10,000 times over, they'll explain it to you. And then you can say, yeah, but they didn't explain that in the movie, so it doesn't make any sense. And if you have an honest person, if you have an honest person, they'll admit it. Like, yeah, you're right. That's kind of a plot point because they need to explain that to me. Because when you're watching the movie, you're not supposed to have to read the books. I bring it up because it's the old story of J.K. Rowling, who explained, to the characters what their backstory was. She told them things that nobody knew, that they did not touch on in the movies, but you got to know your character's backstory to portray them properly, right? A thespian or anybody who's educated on theater could better quote this idea than I can, but the idea of when you portray your character, and I think it's called method acting. I think this is the textbook definition of method acting. It's not just you get into their head, but you come up with every detail of their backstory so that you're not just performing, you're feeling
Inhabiting
what that character feels in that situation. And I think in the context of Firefly, would the shepherd be a more interesting character if I understood where he came from? I don't think I would, because what fans love is not the guy that becomes the shepherd. They love the shepherd. A different version of this.
Interesting.
Do people love Darth Vader more now that they know who Anakin Skywalker was, now that we're getting more and more of that backstory? Do you love Darth Vader more, or do you just love the bad guy? Because I'm iffy on that.
Yeah.
I go back and forth with that idea.
Between being spoon-fed the story and being allowed to just have it live in your head.
Yeah.
There's a big thing there, and
the mystery is part of the appeal, and it's part of the fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one of the problems with the Star Wars comics is we're just getting more Vader Palpatine stories of, oh yeah, they both know they're trying to fuck each other over, and we both know, the audience knows, that nothing's going to come of it because we know the way it all plays out. So it's an ultimately inconsequential story. So no matter what drama you try to build into it, there is no drama. We know the way the story plays out.
Exactly. So is there something interesting that you can tell me that
I think so.
gets me to point A? Which
I think so.
Okay.
Because I point to stories like what the MCU has done with Spider-Man, where Spider-Man was your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He was a street level hero. But when he came into the MCU, he was instantly attached to Tony Stark. And then he was, in Civil War, and he was in space for Infinity War and Endgame. These galactic stakes that were way above what Spider-Man usually deals with. And then what is the end result of all of that? By the time we get through No Way Home, he's erased everybody's memory and he's back to being a street level hero. Like, all of the stuff that didn't line up with the original portrayal of Spider-Man was just the buildup to getting him to be the Spider-Man that we all expected. Like, no one expected him to end at where we thought he should have began in the first place. And another MCU example is the Loki series, where it's looking like it's going to set its own origin up through the course of the series, because it's the end causes the beginning kind of loop.
Right.
And I feel like the Preacher might be one of those characters too, where if you see the seminal events in his life that led him to be the character that gives him so much intrigue in the original series, that might have legs. Because just because we know that this guy has these skills, it doesn't mean that it's going to play out in a paint by numbers fashion to explain how he got there.
Maybe not. And I think in 2023, you can point to the Obi-Wan series. We all have accepted.
Oh, that's everybody's worst fear for Firefly, if you're talking about like flashbacks.
You're following me then on this thought train. Everybody loves Ewan McGregor's performance as Obi-Wan. I think we've all accepted the idea that Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi can eventually age in to Alec Guinness. And we have all accepted it because it makes sense to us. So fast forward 20, 30 years from now, we're going to get more Obi-Wan, and it's going to be him. And eventually somebody's going to close the loop with that character, and it's going to be the movies that you saw when you were very small. That, however, is the minority. We want more of that than we get, but generally speaking, we don't always accept the prequel becomes the sequel. My biggest fear is that they're not just going to tell you about the shepherd and how he became the shepherd, but then you got to do the full flashback, where now you have to get a younger man to portray this character, and we're going to tell you, if there's a 20-year story there, we're going to tell you the first 5 years, but we're not going to tell you the 15. Mm-hmm. So we're not even answering the question, how did he become the shepherd? What happened? But if you want to do an episode of that, I'm okay with that. If you can close that gap in one episode, I'm okay with it. I'll even give you a mini series for the sake of the argument. I just don't want there to be... I don't think you improve the shepherd unless it's something ironic. Unless it's an ironic thing, I don't think it makes sense, and I don't think anybody would care. And my definition of ironic is like the ending of King of the Hill, where Boomhauer was a Texas Ranger the whole time, and he was actually monitoring Dale. Like,
spoiler, damn.
It's been over for 20 years. Get over it.
No, I never liked that show. That's why it's a spoiler for me, because I don't care.
Yeah, that's
Kale. What's going on, buddy?
The man.
We're talking Firefly, so whatever you got to say about that, we are debating whether or not there's a prequel or a reboot that could possibly happen and have legs. So,
I just want more Firefly. That's all I want.
but do you is my question, because you're kind of arguing against yourself. You keep saying like, I want more Firefly because we all agree it was cut off before its time, but also you're like, these are all the reasons we can't do any more of it.
I'm a fan. Of course, I want more. I'm afraid of what the current owner of that property will do with it, so I don't want that.
Here's where it's different, though. Usually, a lot of fandom is like, "Well, we loved everything you gave us, so give us more." And a lot of times, the storytelling side of it is there is no more. Like that is the story. In this case, it was very obvious that there was way more story to be told that never got the chance. So I just want to see that. You don't have to invent more. You just have to give us what you already had in mind. The one thing you could do with a prequel is you could introduce characters in that, like you said, 5-year, 20 years ago kind of time period. If the microphone's picking it up, by the way, my deaf ass 18-year-old kitty is again playing with catnip mice, and she's very loud when she does it. Anyway,
live your life, cat.
Right? I mean, even
Meow,
if 2
bitch.
years or 5 years for every human year instead of 7 like dog years, she's still like Betty White. So she's friggin' immortal. It's amazing. Anyway,
You've just given me an idea for a YouTube series called Golden Kitties.
Amaze balls. No one steal that. It's just been. We've got the timestamps on this video. So
copyright Nerf Herder Council.
You can't have it. The patent office will know. Yeah. But no, if you could take like a 15 years ago character, like the Preacher series has no one familiar, but they have their own side characters, and then those side characters could then be reintroduced in the continuation of the Firefly saga in whatever, continuation happens. And then that would be your connective tissue to be like, oh, well, he was in the miniseries, so now he's here in the future of the show. Like, why didn't we hear about him before? Well, because he was off doing other stuff. Star Wars does it. All the great franchises do this thing where they flash back in time, introduce a character, and then all of a sudden, in the future, those characters are there, and they've addressed why they didn't show up in the stories that you've already seen.
I said it earlier, and I've got to go back to it. I think one thing that Firefly does very well is it uses a flashback to tell the story. It doesn't rely on flashbacks to fill the next 8 episodes worth of the series. It's the opposite of anime, right? You watch anime, the first episode, a lot of darker animes, right? The first episode is very serious. And you watch that and say, I cannot wait for episode 2. Then you get 18 episodes of the most bubblegum, childish, like goofy shit. Then the ending is dark as fuck again. So what you really had was like 2 episodes of a dark story that you padded out because, well, we got to fill that quota of how many episodes we're going to do. Firefly doesn't do that. It doesn't spend 8 episodes building to something that doesn't pay off. If anything, it does the opposite. I again, mentioned it earlier. It touches on things that the audience is terrified of. And then they don't go back to it because they didn't have time, or they didn't have money, or they got the plug pulled on them. Serenity absolutely feels like a rushed, well, if you're going to make me stop, let me at least wrap things up so that I can say that the story's done.
Yeah.
Clearly, there was more to do with that story.
Kale chimes in with a good comment here, though. He says, or they come down with Rogue One cruise disease, not in the original Zydus. Yeah. So if you're going to introduce, on my theory of like a new character in a previous time period, and then where the hell were they when all the episodes of the show happened? Yeah, you do have that issue. If us dumb fucks are able to come up with this concept, though, I guarantee you paid Hollywood writers could probably figure out a way to sell that.
Of course they could, and that's another reason why this isn't happening right now, is because of the ongoing strikes and discussions, and not
Well, the
just.
writers are done. The actors are not.
I, I have to say, this is one time my limited knowledge of the issues. I think it's okay because I think, generally speaking, everybody's got their head in the right place. Nobody wants computers to do all the work because, let's be honest, this is one time we can skip to the end. Machine learning is great for a lot of things, but getting to the point where we don't actually create anything is something that's been touched on in many a science fiction show. Many an anime has touched on that topic. And I think we can all skip to the end where we don't need to spend 5 years learning that we don't want computers to write all of our things and perform all of our things for us. Let's get ahead of that. Let's skip to the end where you don't get to use the likeness of a dead actor just because you had them in a movie one time. I'm okay with that. You want to sign up to let me use your voice, your face, or your likeness? That's your business. But the implied ability to do so, no. Let's just get ahead of that right now. I'm okay with that not being a thing.
Man, I don't have enough whiskey or bladder control to tackle that topic right now. So we need to like put a pin in that. We could do another WTF about that because my brother won't want to participate. That's way too. There's no jokes in that show.
John,
it's very off-brand for
John,
the Nerd Council.
can you hear me?
But
it's Joe talking. I would love to talk Van Halen with you again, and maybe some Mammoth WVH. But I mean, you just got to do the show, John. That's all you need to do. Okay, I'm done talking to John.
Well, it's all right because we've got a third host for our AI conversation, and I would love to hear what Cale has to say about that.
Would he, in fact, be the actual Cale McLeish?
We don't know. It could be a deepfake. It could be a bot. We don't know.
This could be a bot right now. The two of us riding nowhere, spending someone's unearned pay.
I will be completely honest. I have had text conversations with bots that I did not know were bots. I'm shopping for a car right now, and apparently certain dealerships have employed chatbots as representatives, and I've had entire conversations thinking I was speaking to a person, and then got a follow up from an actual person the next day saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, that was our chatbot, and they gave you wrong information." So
what I know
happening
about,
whether you believe it or not at this point. Like,
right. What I know about
tested today. I gave a slight Turing test actually to a texter from a dealership because I don't think they're a real person, and I think they failed. So, but yeah, even buying a car now, you might be talking to artificial intelligence instead of a person. It's incredible.
What I know about the technology, there are some positives. Because you have these wonderful things we all call cell phones that are actually a computer in your pocket that's capable of making phone calls, that have for a very long time now made promises about it's going to be like the Jetsons where you just talk to the thing and it does the thing, or it's going to be like Star Trek, the original series, where you say, "Computer, I need to know this," and it works. The machine learning, the natural language, call it what you want. I refuse to call it artificial intelligence because it's not that. Not really. That can turn this into that experience that we've all been promised for a long time. I just don't want to communicate with computers.
We're just going to use it for sex anyway. I mean,
inevitably,
there's
what
already
everything's
been
used
scandals
for.
over the whole replica AI bullshit because people have developed legitimate feelings for a chatbot. Because of course, the chatbot's like all into you and can look like whatever anime sprite you want it to be. Futurama predicted this back 20 years ago, right?
Yes, it did. What other show touched on that? Didn't they do a thing on Married with Children back in the early 90s?
Probably.
Like Bud found a virtual reality, like something of I don't need to see my girlfriend. Yeah. I can just have my girlfriend whenever I want. I mean, it was funny then, but it ain't funny now, is it?
See, yeah. So that's again, that's a whole other topic. We gotta put a pin in that and get back on what we were talking about with Firefly. Yeah. So I don't know. Where do you come down in general? Like, we've given all the reasons for and against trying to do anything else with Firefly. Would you try to do it again? And what form would it take, Joe?
Would it be Firefly, or are you asking me about the concept of the space cowboy?
I'm saying if something called Firefly was announced by, at this point, it would have to be Hulu. I'm guessing Hulu. It
I
doesn't seem
think
like a
Disney
Disney
owns
Plus
it
show.
now, so it'd be a Disney Plus show, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, they own Hulu, so where would you put it is the question. I feel like if it's not directly owned by Disney, like Star Wars and Marvel, if it's an acquisition like Fox, it lives on Hulu. But let's just pretend it's on Hulu or Disney Plus, or maybe both, because the new Echo show from Marvel is going on both simultaneously. Point is, it's going on streaming on something owned by Disney. It's called Firefly something, or at least it's advertised as in the Firefly universe. What form does it take, and who's in it? You can go solo for this.
I'm gonna say that. Well, I would go solo, except AJ wants to be the man in the front of the mic there. Oh, I'm on the left now.
There you go.
What form does it take? It's a miniseries. It is not a film, because we had that with Serenity, and though I think it worked great, I want to see more stories with these characters. I want them to follow that formula, that episodic formula that they did when they first released Firefly. I want them to remind the audience who these characters are, but I don't want them to dwell on it. So if they're going to reboot Firefly, or they're going to bring back Firefly, if you can get everybody back on board, keep going after Serenity. That means a couple characters are dead, but you can flash back to those characters. I think Firefly does that well. You can even introduce new characters with it. You can replace the two characters that you lost with two new faces, so you get the standard formula of every show you've ever seen that has lost characters over time and is restarted with new characters. If it's Firefly, they got to pick it up where they left off. It's not like Star Trek, where you can come up with a new concept in a different part of the galaxy and just pick it up with all new characters and all new ideas. It's not Voyager to Deep Space Nine to Next Generation. If it's Firefly, you got to pick it up, and I think you got to have those characters that people love. Nathan Fillion, you got to have him. You got to have River. You got to have the Doctor. You've got to have everybody that has survived up to this point. I mean, if you don't have Jane, you're not making Firefly. It's a cast of characters. It's oddballs. It's Guardians of the Galaxy, the show, before we actually had Guardians of the Galaxy in film. That's what it is.
Okay. I have a different take.
Hit me.
Let me give you my pitch here. But first, let's see what Kale has to say here, since he's the third host on apparently the Firefly podcast that we just invented. He says, honestly, I don't think I want it now. I think the concept of new Firefly is more tantalizing than actually having it at this point. Good point. Like, it's like Boba Fett. Everyone wanted to know, like, where'd Boba Fett come from? And then we got where'd Boba Fett come from, and no one liked it. I'd rather have new Chuck where the gap can make sense. Wash is friggin' dead. Yeah, okay. All right. I see where you're coming from on that. And okay, so this actually ties into my pitch. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking what we get is we get a show focused around River, where the time gap is acknowledged. Everybody can age up in character. And the loose framework is that the survivors of the Serenity movie are still there. The ship obviously is intact. The crew is otherwise intact. And you might have a couple of new characters, so you have some new plot threads to follow. But as it makes sense to do so, you flash back to events that are in the past of even the original series or in the interstitial years. So you get kind of a Book of Boba Fett kind of effect. And I hate to say anything positive about Book of Boba Fett, but what you have is you have a loose framework that you're telling a story in the future, but you have all time periods to play with as long as the narrative device holds up, which is where Book of Boba Fett fails. That's a whole other problem. But the idea is you have 20 some years of time to play with, and you can either dabble with the old characters if you want to, or you can tell new stories that are still in the past of the characters that exist in the present day of this new show. But the focus is always on River to begin with. So I think River should be the focus of the new show. And that way you stay away from any direct comparisons where basically Mal and the entire crew were the be all end all of the entire show. And instead it becomes more of an offshoot in the future that still honors the original timeline and characters. So that's my take, Joe. What do you think about that?
I want to be on board with that, but I don't want another we time jumped and nobody gets along anymore. Nobody has communicated for a while, and we got to get the band back together. I feel like we've had enough of that, and I don't think that that's a payoff that really feels valuable to me. If you're going to have a show like this, or you're going to have a story like this that it hasn't been around for a while and you're going to bring it back, you don't have to just switch to everybody disbanded for reasons that we're going to touch on in episode 9 briefly before episode 10 where we fight the big bad. I've had that story recently. I'm okay with it. It's you can take you could take the focus away. I don't know if Firefly is truly Maul's story. I think it's a story about the crew, whatever form they take. You could absolutely focus on River and maybe take the story. This isn't the best way to explain it, but maybe take the story inside her head and start looking at things from her point of view. I think you could get away with that, but taking it off the ship away from those people that we love, I don't see the point. Because I still don't know, after watching the series and watching the film, is River, is she getting better, or is she just letting go of reservations, right? Because she had a few missteps during the series where she did some terrible things, like cutting Jane, being like, he looks good in red. Like that's like the little kid, like, no, you don't cut people with knives. Yeah, but then later on when she figured out, oh, just cut the bad guys with knives, like, is she growing? Is she getting better? Or is she just calibrating and kind of becoming this uber badass that is also very fragile? I don't know the answer. It would be an interesting spin, because what you're talking about is how the movie ends. River kind of cuts loose and becomes normal for a brief second. Though uber badass, oh, she woke up. She's awake. She's fully aware. There's no question about her focus or her sanity or, what has happened to her. Nope, it all just clicked and she became normal. So I think the show's it's really easy to compare Firefly to Cowboy Bebop, but River is kind of the id of the show, but not all the time. So focusing on her, or at least her point of view, like you're saying, would be kind of like bringing back Cowboy Bebop, and the whole show is from Edward's point of view. And that show would just be throw paint at the wall. I mean, I feel like we got that show once. It was called Space Dandy.
Okay, now you're getting too deep cut for me. I don't even know what that show is. But I'm assuming it's a spinoff of Cowboy Bebop.
It is not, but we'll talk after the show.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have a subscription to Crunchyroll, so there's a whole lot of stuff I'm not going to get. But my framework of using River as the lens is the idea that, like I said, the whole story, she was the mystery, right? Like she was the
She's supposed to
MacGuffin.
be.
Yeah, and she is sometimes lucid and sometimes not. And even when she's not lucid, is she the most aware character in the entire series? So that's the big mystery of the whole thing, is like, is she just completely crazy at this point, or does she see things better than anybody? And if she ends up, because of where she ended up in Serenity, like maybe she does have a clue now, or at least she can like control it to where she can be both crazy and sane at the same time. Whatever's going on in this new era of storytelling, you can cast back to events that we know and characters that we know to paint the picture of how we got to what's going on with the current conflict, whatever the story they're trying to tell. So it seems like a flexible way to be like, we're not trying to reboot or do a continuation, because you can't, like I said before, catch lightning in a bottle twice, right?
See,
But
I'm
if you
buying
take a
into
different
what you're saying.
perspective on the original story, now you've got an interesting take. Like I actually love the sequel to 300 because it tells the same story from someone else's perspective. And I love that narrative device of saying, like, here's something you've already seen, but here's all the parts that you didn't see because we were focusing on this instead.
Just in case this is the appropriate response.
Oh, come on!
I don't think 300 is the same scenario, because that was a recent sequel. The film had come out recently, and all they did was they moved the camera, right? So with River and kind of with what you're talking about, it gets us out of the aging up problem to say that the character is different now and time has passed. So though she may still be a bit of an id, she's more in control, or what we would consider to be in control. Like you would perceive her as more sane. She could almost sit there and have a conversation with you, though she may become distracted with whatever is affecting her at that moment. It's the visual in my head, and this is headcanon, right? This is fan fiction. I love the film Leon the Professional. And if anybody wants to make a sequel to that, and it's called Matilda the Professional, and it's just she's 20 years older and she's a killer now, and we're not going to address how she got here. This is just the story that we're telling as of today. I'm on board with that idea. If that movie comes out tomorrow, I'll be there, because you have a character that people love that doesn't have to stop as a little girl who's got some issues now. You can take it forward into, well, what would happen to that character if we accept the headcanon and we accept the story that got us here, and we bring you forward that time jump? That's okay. The risk is flashing back to the things that happened in the middle. And I don't think we want that anymore.
Interesting. Okay.
I think that's a risk, yeah, because I don't care if there's a conflict 20 years in Serenity's future, the film. I don't want to hear about the 20 years unless you just want to tell the story linearly. Because now you're not prequeling, you're mid-quilling.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Out of order.
Mid-quilling. You get into what I call a Picard problem, right? Like everyone's so excited.
I was trying not to just say it was Picard, but now we have a Picard problem.
But it's like Kale says, hypothetically, what if we did have the River Show, but we don't name it as a Firefly show necessarily? So we call it the River Show. Make it a separate entity unto its own, which they tried for 2 seasons of Picard. Let it fly without having it to be tied into what came before, which is what they tried with Picard. And then by season 3, they're like, all right, fuck it. We're just going to get Next Generation back, including the Enterprise. You get everything. Just member berry the hell out of it. That is possible.
Number one, I don't want that, because I don't need more member berries. Number two, I don't think people love a single character out of Firefly. I think they love the crew. That's the show is the crew and how those
True.
people interact with each other and
But
how we deviate and go off on tangents with one or two of them at a time. That's what people love about that show.
I still feel like River is the MacGuffin. Like, she is the focal point. Did we really care like what was going? The crew did not have an arc. Like, where are they going? What are they doing with their lives? But this mysterious girl shows up and we don't know anything about her. And she's just weird. And she grows throughout the series. All the other characters do is basically be themselves, but adapt to this new circumstance. But as characters, they don't really grow. Whereas River does evolve. So I feel like if you're going to pick up some story thread, what character has the most interesting thread to pick up in the future? What character would have changed the most in the future?
It would be bad writing if the pickup is Maul and River are still traveling together.
Yeah, no.
Like if he became like a father figure, because he kind of did at the end of Serenity. Like, he kind of, watch the movie again, he kind of cooled his jets a little bit and started caring about people a little bit, but he's still the same guy. So if there's a main character of Firefly, it's Maul is the leader and River is kind of the id. So there's your two extremes of that story. But I don't think you can break that. I don't think you can break up that cast, that crew. I should have said crew. I don't think you can break them up. Because even when they do the prequel episode where they explain how everybody became part of that crew, that's just telling a story. Because it was relative to that episode. Once you got your crew, you love your crew. The best episodes of Cowboy Bebop are not just Jet and Spike. But that's what you have at the beginning, and that's what you have at the end. It's a full circle thing, so it's not bad storytelling, but you don't love those episodes. You love the middle when everybody's together and shit's just gone, fucking haywire. So I don't think you can do that. I don't think people love River specifically enough to want to watch a show that's just about River. It's not like Wednesday Addams where we're gonna get River, and what is this River show? Oh, it's this character from Firefly that everybody loved. Well, this is great. Why didn't they just make more Firefly? Now you're in a Picard situation. Now you're trying to sell the audience on this solo idea, and then you just give up at the end. Like, nope, we're just gonna make more Firefly. I don't think you can. I don't think you can.
I think what we agree upon is that the least interesting thing they could do is just give us more Firefly. You can't just like pick up after the movie and be like, yeah, it's fine, whatever. Like,
there's more.
It can't be the same show just picked up after a 20-year absence.
If the Reavers are the ultimate bad in the universe, they wrapped it up. So now let's move forward. Let's get to the Whisperers, right? Let's get to, well, there actually
the
is
Alliance
more.
Still needs addressed.
Yes, that's how you move forward. Is it becomes an alliance type conflict, whatever that might be. In fact, I'll write it for you. By the end of it, Maul's actually going to be fighting for the alliance. Why? Because there's going to be somebody else far worse who's trying to take them down, and things are not going to be good if they win. The First Order is coming.
Oh, shit. Yeah, now we're just making Star Wars out of Firefly.
Yeah, ugh. But you know what? It'd be all right. It would make sense in that universe. It would absolutely make sense.
Oh, God. Here's a mashup. Kale says, well, we stopped the Empire with Reavers. What? Who was there? Who's on Vong? Jeez. God, layers. Layers upon layers.
Welcome to Battlestar Galactica Forum.
I do love that Kale did mention about Kaylee though. Kaylee, oh my God, you talk about like a character crush. I'm not one of those people who gets like super attached to a single character, but oh my God, anything happened to her ever, and I was like, quit messing with my girl. Like I don't have like a romantic thing for her. I have a big brother thing for her where I'm like, you don't mess with my family. And Kaylee is like family to me.
Absolutely one of my favorite moments in the series is when Maul says something. I forget what it was. And it's 100% like...
By the way, I got to stop you. It's Mal. Maul is a Darth in Star Wars. Mal is...
You're correct.
It's a Han situation.
I appreciate your focus on accuracy. I won't take the time to point out the mistakes you've made tonight, sir. But
but I just keep hearing Maul, and I keep going Star Wars, and we're talking Firefly. So
100%, you're right. I am on the Nerf Herder Council. You can't blame me. Absolutely, one of my favorite moments in the whole series is when Mal says something, and Kaylee just walks away. And it's 100% the dad, the big brother moment of, what? What did I do? And guess what? Your little tomboy sister doesn't want to be a tomboy. Like she just wants to wear a pretty dress and be seen as a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Hence the tie back at the end of Serenity, right? This all went full circle eventually. And the next scene is, yep, he got her the pink dress, and now he took her to the prom. Big brother, dad. I don't know what Mal's supposed to be. I think he's kind of the dad character for Kaylee. And yeah, 100%. It's like one of the best scenes in the whole series where I got my dress. I'm the princess today. Love it. Don't care how stereotypical it is. I think everybody loves that character. In fact, I think I think she's one of the best. I think she's the it of the show more than River. But everybody in the series, it has like 80% what they are, and then 20% they borrow from somebody else. So no one person is the one thing of that show. It's a little bit ahead of itself or behind itself if you're looking at the character design wheel here. I mean, what's Jane? Is he like the uber badass who's just, I like my guns and I like shooting things and I just want money? And then you get him for a second where he's like, what did I do?
Yeah,
it's a good show.
He's the heavy with a heart of gold, kind of.
He'd stab you in the back, except he wouldn't because, well, he doesn't want to die. He learned his lesson that one time.
I love that he hates himself every time he makes the right decision. Like anytime he's on the moral side, he's annoyed with himself. Like, fuck this conscience of mine. Can I just please kill somebody?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we haven't. That's the first time we mentioned Jane in all of tonight, by the way.
I don't think it is. I think I snuck one in earlier, but there's not a lot you can say about that character without just talking about what's Jane's arc. He starts as just a douchebag mercenary guy, and then he thinks about betraying people and getting paid, and by the end of the series and the end of Serenity, he turns into like the uber badass. These are my people, and you're not coming in. I got the big gun, and I don't care how many Reavers there are. You're not going to get past me. Like he fully peaks as super badass. And that's exactly what you want that character to be. As much as he's kind of a dick, he peaks as super badass, and that's what you want when you're watching this show. Like, I don't want him to get his comeuppance. I want him to learn his fucking lesson.
So, does Jane actually earn the hero status, as Kale says, or does he just do heroic things coincidentally? Like, is it a choice to be heroic, or did he just happen to do something that helped our heroes?
Throughout the series, he's just getting paid. He doesn't want to be there, except he's getting paid.
Yeah, and Mal even understands that. He's like, look, man, the money's flowing, so stay where you are. Like, don't fuck me over. I'll keep you paid. He's never trying to like appeal to his like better nature. He's just like, look, man, you're getting paid by me. So if you want to keep getting paid by me, don't kill me. it's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's
like he said in at least one episode, he's like, I know if you get a better offer, you're going to stab me in the back. He's like, I just guarantee you that what might seem like a good payoff now is bad in the long run.
Well, that, and he even
hospital
tells him, like, if you're gonna stab me in the back, do it to my face. Like,
yeah,
tell me you're going to leave. Don't try to fuck me over. Like, so that's part of Mal's character that everybody loves, right?
Yeah,
he's not just talk. Like, you get it a little bit, but maybe that's one of the hanging threads that we didn't really get from the show or the film. You don't really get Mal cutting loose, not the way River did at the end of Serenity. Like, that's the character that's the hit the button in the middle of the boss fight to do the super special move that wins it in one blow. Like, we really haven't gotten that from Mal. But it's like everybody there knows about it. So you're still waiting for him to go. I just love referencing Dragon Ball Z. We're waiting for Mal to go Super Saiyan. It just hasn't happened yet. But we've gotten real close a few times. Like,
yeah.
Real close.
Yeah.
It's a threat. It's one of those things, once they go there, they can never do it again. It'd have to be the last thing that character does. Everybody would have to be dead around him, and then just there he goes.
I think Kale's
would become John Wick.
Tie. Yes, exactly. I think Kale's putting a good bow tie in this, because I was going to actually bring up this point anyway. Mal is obviously supposed to be the Han Solo type, right? Like the scoundrel with a heart of gold. And yeah, so he says this could be put back onto Han Solo in Ep 4, though. But that ending of Serenity is him coming back to cover Luke's ass in the trench. Exactly. Like, Mal was out. He had his own ass covered, and he's like, I wish I wasn't such a good guy. And, he goes back in to his own peril to save the people he cares about. So as much as he wants to be the give no shits kind of anti-hero, he actually does care.
Yes.
And that's why, like, man, it's just, the whole show was.
That's why the shepherd, man, when that happens to the shepherd, I don't care what you believe, just believe. That's somebody looking you in the eye going, you're a good guy. So quit pretending. And
I'll tell you, I've been halfway faking my way through this conversation because I have not seen Serenity in a very long time. And I think what we need to do is we need to do a watch along in a couple of Fridays from now.
Sign me up.
And y'all can watch my mind be blown in real time on camera, because
I'll give you from now till then to at least watch the series again.
I'm going to steamroll through that series. The trick is, how do we get John to watch that series? Because I guarantee he will enjoy it.
Is he still awake? I'll ask him.
It's Star Wars and Star Trek mashed up together, right? Like, it's Wagon Train to the Stars. It's the Western, but
it's Cowboy Bebop. Flavor. It's Cowboys and Aliens. It's, let me see, how many other space cowboy type things are there? Let me see how many references I can make in one shot. It's like Trigun mixed with Guardians of the Galaxy. It's Outlaw Star. It's Space Dandy. It's what you want from the Mandalorian. It's the episode of Mandalorian where he literally has guns and 12 paces at high noon.
All right, I'm throwing a Hail Mary right here. I'm going to say this. What are you doing the night before Thanksgiving? November 22nd.
Watching Serenity.
So if we do a live watch along, and anybody with a webcam and the ability to jump onto StreamYard with us, we can all get in there.
Schedule it now, my friend. Schedule it now.
Kale, you heard it now. I don't know what you're doing that Wednesday morning, since you're, 12 hours opposite us, or 9 hours, whatever the hell, Australia is doing. But, yeah, you don't have Thanksgiving. I know that. But we'll talk offline. But Kale, you're part of this. Okay. So we're going to figure out a time slot. We're going figure out a time slot that works for everybody, and we are going to do a live watch along of Serenity. And we're all going to be on camera.
Kale, it's not his fault. He's like 3 drinks in, man.
No, it's not that. It's just I'm used to international scheduling. I work with people in France all the time. So, and you know what? You just make it work. It's fine.
That's right.
We'll figure it out.
That's 100%.
Point is, there's going to be a live watch along of Serenity. It's going to be an off-schedule show. We always do something weird for like the day before U.S. Thanksgiving anyway. So this is going to be our weird thing this year. We're going to do a live watch along of Serenity. 12 hours ahead. Okay. 12 hours ahead is Kale. So apparently he lives in the future, which means he's about to eat lunch, being that it is 11:56 p.m. Eastern time. So it's 11:56 a.m. for Kale. Have a good Sando for us, okay? Point is, yes, the next WTF episode is going to be on Wednesday, November 22nd, whether you're down under or not. And we're going to watch Serenity live. We're going to figure out how to stream that thing. We're not going to put it on the screen, obviously, but we will do a live watch along.
Work something out.
We'll do live commentary. It's going to be a good time. I'm really curious to see if this actually shows up on the Patreon feed, because we do have a Patreon feed for Nerf Herder Council. Currently, there are 2 tiers. And
what's the URL for NHC Patreon?
That would be patreon.com/NHC podcast. When I remember to do it, I'll add the link to the nhcpodcast.com website. But anyway, NHC podcast is on Patreon at patreon.com/NHC podcast. You can join for $1 and get a shout out on every episode that we do, or for $3 a month, by the way, and we do 2 episodes a month minimum. You not only get a shout out with an on-screen mention during our live streams, but you also get early audio access to the shows that we publish. So instead of waiting until Sunday after our Wednesday live stream, you get it on Friday instead. So if you just can't wait, if you want, fresh Nerf Herder Council in your earballs, then sign up for the $3 a month tier. And we have plans for $5 and above, but we want to make sure that people actually want that stuff. So go to our Patreon or hit us up on any of our socials, which is something like, twitter.com/NHC podcast, or our Facebook page, which is also found by Googling Nerf Herder Council. Tell us what you want to see, what you'd be willing to pay money for to get extra access to. We'll do it. It's great. We got ideas for live streams. We got games. We got any kind of additional content of other shows you want us to cover. All that kind of stuff. Joe, we had some ideas of stuff that we wanted to do as well, because let's face it, you're far more open-minded than John is. So what would you consider doing on a semi-regular basis if people were willing to pay money for it?
Okay, now it's a loaded question because you mentioned cash. What
franchises would you be willing to cover that we have not really covered on the Nerf Herder Council?
Do we need to pick one franchise, or can we just point the light
plural
at everything else we haven't talked about, right?
It was plural.
Because we've been talking Firefly all night. There's so much good sci-fi. Maybe that's the answer, AJ. What are the good sci-fi shows that haven't been talked about recently? I'm going to name one you and I have talked about one time.
The Titans.
I cannot find anybody talking about. We need to talk about Sliders. We need to go back and revisit Sliders.
Ooh, okay, that's a deeper cut. I was going to cover the 3 big ones first. Trek, what do you got? Obviously, Red Dwarf. I've never seen. And
sign me up. Doctor Who, man. I've struggled getting started with that one. I've got some advice that I've gotten from some diehard fans. It's not a train you can do it all. You just got to be willing to jump on, and wherever you start is where you move forward. It's props to the people that have been around long enough to have done it all, because if you try to do it all today, you're never going to catch up. And not just because some of it's missing to time.
So basically what we're saying is we got plenty of ideas for more stuff to put out there, as long as you want to see it. So Tell
Hell
us on our Patreon page. Tell us on our socials. We'll get that stuff covered because we're nerds and we love to go live anyway. We love to hear ourselves talk. Hopefully you do too. So, Joe, if they want to hear you talk, what else do you cover besides these nerdy-ass franchises we've already covered?
Well, dude, I got to tell you, the podcasts that have been created at discussmetal.com, there is more to come. I have to tell you that there are some episodes in the work this year because I have gotten some requests I didn't expect. But the main thing that's been going down lately is the Fright Lab. I've been hanging out with a guy named Lucas talking about horror movies, and you can find all of those podcasts, 27 episodes, at frightlabpodcast.com. Right now, we've been talking for quite a while, and we've been talking about some very obscure films, also some not very obscure films. I think I just released The Hellraiser Legacy, where we talk about the history of the Hellraiser films and the impact of the first two on horror as a whole. So, frightlabpodcast.com. Check that shit out.
I'm down. Also, you have published a few episodes on music, right?
Oh, more than a few. Discography discussion, it's still out there. Discussmetal.com, it's still out there.
Mm-hmm.
More to come on that.
There you go. Exactly. So if anyone wants to chime in on those topics or more, you can always hit us up on our socials. Joe, where can they find you?
I don't even know where I am anymore. I can't say that Twitter is going to be a long-term stay for me, but you can definitely find me on twitter.com at DiscussMetalJoe. I refuse to call that what it is currently, but you know what? I'm going to spin it a different direction. I'm going to tell everybody to come to discord.frightlabpodcast.com. I've been talking about this podcast. Well, we're talking about horror movies on Discord all the time. AJ, I got to get you in there. I have to get John in there. We need to just grab hold of the nerdy isms that is Discord and create this awesome server of discussion and madness and video games and all the random things that people do with their time. No limits on that. Discord.frightlabpodcast.com. That's where you'll find me.
All right. And you can find the Nerf Herder Council on all the socials. We have a Facebook page. Just look for the Nerf Herder Council on there. You can also go to nhcpodcast.com for our website, and that has all our links there too. You can find us on Twitter at NHC Podcast. You can find me specifically on Twitter at Drake Adams 579. And if there's anything else you want to find out about the show, by all means, hit us up. Now, Joe's, any last minute comments before we sign off for the night?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting some text messages saying, dude, this was a great show. And I think that Firefly is something long overdue. If I have to sell it to John, in fact, play this clip for John. If you love Han Solo, you need to watch Firefly. And you got 2 weeks to catch up because we're watching Serenity, and it's going to be a good time.
Absolutely.
We're in for 2 hours on that one, man. No breaks. Yep.
So Wednesday, November 22nd, we will give you the exact time we're going live. Eastern time specifically. You just have to convert for yourselves. Sorry, Kale. Do the math. It's an open invite, though. We are going to promote that on our socials. Anybody with a webcam who wants to sign in, you can hit us up on our socials. We will make sure you're in the show. We will do a live watch along of Serenity on a WTF Wednesday, the day before U.S. Thanksgiving. And in the meantime, thank you so much for tuning in, guys, and we will catch you next time.